Dartmoor Brewery, Dragon's Breath.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. This is another one from the Dartmoor Brewery. Now, I recently reviewed their Jail Ale, which is their flagship beer. They've also got this on their books, and it's the Dragon's Breath, which they've billed as a winter warmer. Now, I couldn't resist this because Old Ale / winter warmer is one of my favourite styles of beer, and it goes back to a great British brewing tradition of dark malty ales. And yes, there's been beers that have come through since that are in that style. I think there's very few that actually do encapsulate that, not particularly the exact recipes, but that kind of tradition, i.e. dark beer, malt forward, slightly fruity, less emphasis on the hops, and big ABV. Now, this would appear to have some of that, although the ABV is not something that is in keeping with that style. It's 4.4%, which I suppose they've probably done that so as it's a session beer. But there are some great old ales / winter warmers out there. So I'm just thinking through some of the really good ones. Obviously, Old Peculiar, that's more or less top of the tree. That is a great beer, and there's a whole host of others. I mean, Hepworth do one called Old, which is not so great in the bottle, but on tap it is very nice indeed. I tried that down in Hastings. That's a really good one. There's the Sam Smith's Winter Warmer, which is a great one, and unfortunately it's a seasonal beer and it comes out around Christmas. That very much is in keeping with that style. It's quite sweet, it's got some invert sugar in it, as is a trademark with Sam Smith's. The ABV is quite high. Shepherd Neame do one as well. It's like their Christmas beer. And Christmas beer, they used to call them October ales back in the day, and eventually the term Old Ale was applied to them. But they're, as I say, traditional dark beers that have actually, well, back then the tradition was for the landlord to actually ferment the beer in his own cellars, or to mature it in his own cellars, and you would occasionally get blends of stale and fresh beer. Obviously, stale didn't have the same connotations as it does now. Stale beer meant matured beer. Some people preferred the taste of fresh beer, some people preferred the taste of the more mature style of beer. Unfortunately, the Napoleonic Wars put an end to all that when grain was, I wouldn't say rationed, but it was basically used for more important things than brewing beer. And where the grain bill got less, and certainly the roasted malt content got less in beers, the beer became lighter, and yeah, as I say, the rest is history. And of course, in what was Bohemia, Moravia, then they started bottom fermenting stuff, and yeah, the rest is history. But this type of beer, I think, is what England or the UK as a whole does best. Now, obviously, Scotland has got its own take on these kind of beers, like heavies and wee heavies and that kind of thing. But it generally does have a characteristic of the ones I've just mentioned. They're very malt forward, quite fruity, big ABV, and that's what you're getting in sort of modern sense. What the beer tasted back then, is anyone's guess. I mean, I'd imagine it would be quite sour, depending on how the landlord kept it. I'd love to go back in time and just see what the beer tasted like back then. I suppose people didn't know any different, and there's nobody here to really describe what it tasted like back then, but it does intrigue me, and I often do wonder what it does. And sometimes, especially when I'm looking at programmes, I don't know if you've ever seen Sharp at all with Sean Bean. I've always wondered why he's quite angry. It's because his first name doesn't rhyme with his surname. It's always intrigued me, that is. But anyway, I've always wondered what, when they're drinking ale, as they say, what it would actually taste like. But again, I digress. Dartmoor Brewery, been going since 1994. They say they're the second biggest brewery in Devon. I'm really struggling. I have looked it up. I can't think what is a bigger brewery. Now, if somebody knows that, please let me know, because it's intriguing me and it's bugging me, but I just can't find out which one's bigger. I know the Otter Brewery are based down there, and if you've not tried Otter Ale, give that a blast. That's a really good ale, that is. Really do enjoy that. But yeah, there's not many, I think, can sort of compete with this lot, because I know you can get this stuff down up in Kent. I mean, Devon really is the deep south, isn't it, when it comes to UK geography. I'm not sure whether you'd see this up north, and I do make these disclaimers when I review beers from the southwest, sort of Cornwall and Devon way, and even Sussex and Kent as well. I really don't know how far they will travel. I think Shepherd Neame travel up there. They're one of the bigger style breweries, and obviously I'd say they're on a par with sort of Timothy Taylor and Sam Smith. So if you can get that down here, I'm sure you can get that up there. But I don't think Dartmoor are quite, or the Dartmoor Brewery are quite on that scale. But who knows? Anyway, I'm digressing. I'm treading water. Let's investigate this beer. This is a 500ml bottle. As I said, it is 4.4%. It says on the side, flavoured with black treacle. Have I ever had black treacle in a beer before? May have had it in a stout. One of them craft stouts, I think, may have had treacle in there. Dragon's Breath is a unique, rich ale that was launched in December 2010. Deep ruby brown in colour. Yep, that's what you'd expect from this type of beer. Full-bodied with a delicious aftertaste of Morello cherries. I wonder where that's coming from. This classic has been delighting beer lovers in our heartland for years. Dragon's Breath is traditionally brewed with the finely malted barleys and hops at the highest brewery in the UK, nearly 1,500 feet above sea level. Dartmoor Brewery beers have been enjoyed by customers across the southwest and beyond since 1994. Brewed at Dartmoor Brewery, Princetown, that's where they're based, in Devon. Ingredients: water, malted barley, hops, treacle, caramel and licorice. Adjuncts galore in this. Malted barley, hops, which is fine, treacle, caramel. Why would you put caramel in there? And licorice. Now I do like a bit of licorice in beer, but you normally tend to find that from certain hops, and it's not really licorice, it's aniseed. A lot of people do mistake that. Certain British hops, or English hops I should say, contain an aniseed flavour. But there you go. What else we got? Yeah, it's 500ml. The Chief Medical Officer's recommendations, you can fuck right off, my friend. And there you go, there's the label. Dragon's Breath. I wonder why they call it that. Oh well, there you go. Let's get it open. Let's see what is going on with this. Now the ingredients are slightly alarming. Caramel, licorice, and fucking treacle. Alright, treacle. Right, yeah, there you go. Cost me £2.69. Cap is plain black. Got that from, what's the sell by date? I got this from a shop in Devon, which was extolling the great traditional Devon produce. There's no fucking sell by date on this, which is worrying me slightly. Does that matter? Probably not. Let's get it in a glass, see what's going on. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think I've seen this before in a Wetherspoons on tap down here in their beer festival season, or during their beer festival season I should say. And you occasionally do get a really good ale. Wetherspoons do a lot of things wrong, but they do get certain things right. Their breakfast is one, and the guest ales that they have is another. There it is. It is a ruby colour, very dark. You're seeing that, and you can see through it. If you look at it normally, the head's not lasting long. It's a bit bit worrying. Aroma, not big, but the aroma's not big at all. I would have expected huge aromas coming from it, but I can definitely get the caramel, and it's sort of I don't know, is it an artificial caramel? It doesn't really smell artificial, to be honest. If in a blindfold test I'd say that was probably caramel malt, but what the fuck do I know with my eyes closed? I can't even say much with my fucking eyes open. But the aromas aren't big at all. I'm getting caramel, and that's about it. It's just sort of caramel, sweet caramel. And that, oh yeah, well, don't try and fucking get aromas that aren't there. There it is, head fucking dissipated, as flat as a witch's tit now. Let's taste it. Bottoms up. Initial thoughts, not much flavour. Morello cherries, nah. Caramel, not really. We dive in again. No, there isn't much there at all. No. Do you know what? I think this may be a little bit too chilled, because I had it in the fridge. I've just done a review of the Sagres beer before this, in the hope that this would have sort of warmed up a little bit. This room's quite warm, but I think I'm going to have to leave this to warm up a little bit. So watch this space. Right, let's try again, shall we? At a slightly warmer room temperature. Well, cellar temperature, I'd say, not room temperature. Right, aroma. Yeah, and again, as I say, I really can't emphasise this too much. Drinking beer at the right temperature don't half make a difference. Really does. I mean, you've just seen there, I really wasn't getting anything at all. And if I'd have kept on with it and I'd have said, yeah, this is unremarkable, not impressing me at all. Shame, because the jail ale was pretty good. Now I've let this go to what I think is cellar temperature. The aromas are just flowing out now, and they really are. The caramel is much bigger. I'm also getting the slight cherry-ish type flavour, and there's also a hint of that licorice that they're talking about as well. It's not big, the licorice, but it's definitely there, and it just smells more interesting, and it smells more like a winter warmer, what I would perceive to be a winter warmer or an old ale. Yeah, it's like if you ever tried that Cranbourne poacher, I mean, that's from the Badger Brewery. That's huge. The flavours on that are absolutely massive, and damson is the big thing on there. I'm sure it's artificially flavoured, but it tastes quite nice. From what I remember, I should review that one again, because I reviewed that about 2 years ago. It's one of the first beers I reviewed, and my palate has obviously changed since then, but this is like a lighter version of that. It does smell nice. Let's see what it tastes like. So, cheers again. The flavours are more pronounced. I'm really getting some of that dark dried fruit flavour coming from it now. The Morello cherries flavour is very, very subtle on that. It's not big. But it is nice. I will say that. It's not that full-bodied, believe it or not. I thought it would have been a real big full-bodied malty ale, but it's not. It's reasonably light. And how can I put this? The aromas on here certainly have improved, I will say that. But I'm Yeah, and again, the caramel malt, well, caramel flavouring, I imagine, that's quite big on there, but it doesn't really translate to the flavour. Don't get me wrong, from previous, the flavours are a lot bigger, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to the aroma, not that big. But I have to say, generally pleasant. The flavours aren't too big, so you could easily session this. And if you're a fan of ruby ales, this would be one for you, because most people, when they, well, I'm not saying most people, if you're watching this, you obviously have a bit of a knowledge on beer and what it should taste like. But a lot of people will think Witchwood Hobgoblin is the be-all and end-all of the ruby ales, but I mean, it really isn't, to be honest. It's a Marston's beer, and it hasn't got any of the flavours that this has got. But this is, in my opinion, along with the Hepworth Old, and I've done this before, I've done the Hepworth Old on cask, and I imagine this on cask would be a really good session beer. That's not bad. Subtle flavours. Not big, subtle, which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. If you're sessioning beer, you don't want huge flavours. Not really. You want some flavour, but you don't want massive amounts of flavour. Now, you could argue that, well, some people, they will drink stuff like Guinness, which has got, well, what you might think has got a really strong flavour, but in the grand scheme of things, Guinness isn't that flavourful. You know, if you try some of the other stouts that are available, certainly the Shepherd Neame Double Stout, for me that's the most intense stout I have ever tried, and you really couldn't session that. It's just so big and bold that one pint you think, I've not had me fill, but I've had me fill of this, and it's really, when they talk about satisfying, that's what the Shepherd Neame Stout is like. So it's the opposite to a session beer. That's one to be savouring. This, on the other hand, the flavours are subdued. They are there, they're subdued, and they're subtle. You really have to concentrate to get them flavours. But once you do, you can sort of half see what they're talking about. The Morello cherry on there, you fucking really have to concentrate to try and get that flavour. And it's not a big part of it. The treacle was an alarm bell for me. I thought it was going to be sickly sweet, but it's not. It just tastes very nice. The caramel, I did question why they put that in there, but all round, it isn't that bad. Nothing in that tastes artificial, which is good. Again, it's not overly sweet. And I think, you know, if you're going to put adjuncts in there, such as treacle, caramel, and if they've put Morello cherries in there, of course Morello cherries are normally used for Belgian creek beers, and they've got quite a distinct taste to them. They're very strong, very intense cherry flavour on them. Sometimes if you put too much of that artificial stuff in the beer, it just fucking ruins it. They've got this right, they've got that balance right, and overall, that is not a bad beer. So I've just remembered I've thrown the bottle out. I went downstairs and I put it by the recycle bin. It's in the bin. I'm not fucking going downstairs, so I'll just hold this up. So what's the verdict on Dragon's Breath by the Dartmoor Brewery? Not bad. Don't let the description put you off, because when you see it's flavoured with caramel, you see the treacle in there and the Morello cherry flavour. That doesn't come naturally, that Morello cherry flavour. There's no hop that will taste like that. If you see Morello cherries in beer, it's either a flavouring or it is actually Morello cherries. But it's not a bad beer, I will say that. It's quite in keeping with an old ale, albeit a low ABV old ale style beer. Quite nice. Certainly not up there with stuff like Old Peculiar and even the Hepworth Old on cask, I will say. But it isn't bad. I'd love to try this on cask, actually, because you do sort of get an idea what it's like with these smaller breweries. from their beers in the bottle. I think what they do is they just have, well, obviously what they do, they have the same beer and they just shoot a load of carbon dioxide on it. But this is quite nice. I'm going to give it well, what would I do? I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. And well, no, I'm not. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I quite like this. It's nice. I probably wouldn't buy it again in the bottle, but if I did see it on cask, I definitely would give it a go. And again, I really want to emphasise how important it is, certainly with English ales. And I know you Yanks viewers are saying, oh, you all drink beer at room temperature. No, we don't. We drink it at cellar temperature, which is how beer was served up back in the day. We're upholding a great British tradition of serving our real ale at cellar temperature. It's the way it's always been. We don't put them in fridges. We don't, well, you shouldn't be putting it in fridges. Not like me, not like silly bollocks who has been putting it in the fridge and bringing it out and letting it try to cool down, because this is what happens. It's a perfect example of what you do. If you put real ale into a fridge, you miss a lot of the flavours, and that's why you serve it at cellar temperature. And as I say, this is a really nice pint. Worthy of a 7 out of 10, I think. A solid 7 out of 10. And I'm probably, next time I'm down in Devon, I'm going to probably see if I can get this on cask somewhere. I'm sure there must be somewhere that does this on cask, maybe even the Wetherspoons as well. I think I may have seen this up in Kent on cask as well, and if I do, I'm definitely going to give it a go, because that is not bad pint. That's 7 out of 10. I recommend it, but if you can get it on cask, do that, and please report back. I'll be intrigued to know. And if I do try it, I will let you know. But yeah, for me, that's a 7 out of 10, recommended. And remember, beer is working class champagne.